All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many people joining us this evening. We had a little snafu. You may have heard that the Amazon Web Services were down most of the day, and our neon system that we use to send out and register people and we send out emails through was part of that. So I want to say a shout out to Kat Gray, our member services director, who sat and copied and pasted 5,000 email addresses into her Outlook email to send notices out because we didn't want folks to miss this. And then you probably got a second reminder at about 5:30 this evening when Neon came back online. So, but we're glad that folks are here. And I want to thank the DC Arts Council of Arts and Humanities for sponsoring our monthly research master classes so that we can offer them free to all of you. And I'm very excited this evening to have Dr. Collin Boothby joining us all the way from Hawaii. Um, he is a good friend of Catherine's. That's how I met him. And so he's going to share some of his research. A little bit about him. He is the director of choral activities at Hawaii Pacific University in Honolulu. Not a bad place to have to work. And he has a doctorate of musical arts in sacred music from the University of Southern California. He also holds a Master's of Music in Organ Performance from Rice University and a Bachelor of Music from Texas Christian University. And he has been a featured performer and conductor in many of places that you may have heard of, such as Carnegie Hall, Canterbury Cathedral, Washington National Cathedral, and has toured with both college groups. And we're very lucky to have him come and talk about navigating our vocal changes that happen as we age. That is something that is natural, but can be very frustrating. And so he's going to talk to us about that and some things that we can do to help us work through that process. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Collin Boothby. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you all the way from Honolulu, Hawaii today. The HPU campus is kind of what you see in the background here. My choir room is kind of down in the bottom right-hand side of the screen, which is a beautiful place to make music. I also work at, oh, I need to go over to my slideshow. Give me just a second. Okay, is that going to go? Here we go. I work at Church of the Crossroads, which is a UCC church in Honolulu, Hawaii. And here you can see some of the singers I work with. And just a little bit about kind of why I got interested in this topic to begin with is I kind of started my career more on the organ, choral, sacred music side of things, working in a variety of churches from large to small and a few different denominations. And then, as someone whose main training was in the organ, I felt like I had some questions about okay, if I'm working with a church choir that has a wide range of ages of singers, like how is it that I should be, especially as an organist, working with them? So that was kind of the big question that really inspired me to go on and do my doctorate. And so one of the really great fields at USC is in vocology or voice science. So I was privileged to have a really great mentor there, Lynn Helding. She's the senior editor of the Journal of Singing, and a really important person in the field. So she was able to help guide me through some of this research, which I'm excited to share with you today. So for the plan for this evening, I wanted to kind of do a bit of overview on how the voice actually works from a physiological perspective. I think some of us might know this if we're coming from the medical background side of things, and some of us might have been singing for our whole lives and never really stopped to think about how is it that we actually make sound come out of our bodies and then use that to sing with one another. So we'll start off with kind of a review of how that works. And then we'll talk about this funny word presbyphonia, which has nothing to do with the Presbyterians. So if you're Presbyterian, you can be rest assured that's okay. And then we'll get really into the nuts and bolts of some of the changes that happen as we age. And then really where my research kind of focused, the pinnacle was what are the techniques that speech therapists use when they're working with patients who do have presbyphonia? And are there any of those techniques that choir directors and singers can implement, not so much as as trying to fix a problem, but rather to maintain strength, vocal strength, and health. So that's kind of the game plan for today. So we will start off. I like to use this acronym of RPRAC. So these are the 5 systems of the voice that make it go and let us do things like speak and sing. So it starts off with respiration, and then we have phonation, resonation, articulation, and we could not do any of this without our brain. So cognition plays an important role in this too. So, first off, respiration starts with our lungs. So you can see this little graphic here of the air which enters our lungs, and then we control that air and use it to power the vocal folds. So we can kind of think of air in the lungs as sort of gas in the gas tank. So respiration is what starts this whole process off. And then phonation is the actual act of um, making sound. Now, I won't do this over Zoom because I think the audio will not be so friendly to us. But if you've ever taken a sheet of paper and folded it in half and then blown into it, and it's that really buzzy kind of sound, um, almost the that kind of sound. That is the actual sound our vocal folds make, which is kind of wild. So the air passes through a really narrow opening, creates that pitched buzz, and then it goes into that sound goes into our throat and our mouth, and that's where it acts sort of like the inside of an instrument. Like here we see this guitar, and then those sound waves bounce all around, all around, all around, and then eventually they come out of our mouth and we hear audible sound. We take that sound and we use things like our tongue, our lips, our teeth, and we chop up that sound. And that's the process of articulation. And that's what creates consonants. I know many choral directors often stress the importance of diction, and that's all about articulation. So if we back up 1 second, we can think about resonation is for vowels, and then articulation is for consonants. And lastly, our brain. What would we do without it? Our brain tells us how to do all of these things, and it tells us how to do this basically from birth, that we know how to make some of these sounds. We don't have to consciously say, oh, I'm going to exhale now, and then I'm going to make my mouth this certain shape and do that. We spend some time thinking about that in the context of singing, but generally making sound is one of those things our brain just does for us, which is super handy. So that's the kind of overview of the 5 systems of the voice. So moving into a little bit more sciencey part of this, let's look at the larynx. So this is what we can think of as sort of our house that our actual vocal system is in here. So there's a few things I want to point out. You notice, and we've got kind of 2 views here. Um, One is this is on the left is a front on view. If I, Marianne, if I circle this, can people see that? Is that
Yes.
visible?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Great.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
So this is looking like if you were standing and looking at someone's front, this is, and there's no skin, obviously, this is what you would see. So up at the top is the hyoid bone. Now, it is the only bone in this whole area. All of the rest of this is made up of soft tissue or cartilage or muscle. The thyroid cartilage is the biggest part in the front. And if you want to very gently, you can kind of feel, and you can feel that notch. Some people, it's a little bit more present than others. Sometimes it gets referred to as the Adam's apple, but everyone has one. So if you want to kind of gently feel around for that, and you can feel, oh, yeah, I feel that little notch, and that is the front of your thyroid cartilage. Not to be confused with the thyroid gland, which is a little bit different and sits below all of this. Um, if we're looking at this cross-section view, in here we can see that the thyroid cartilage sits up here on the side. So that's the front. Now in the back, it's pretty thin here. But there's another cartilage, the cricoid cartilage, that's sort of the opposite. So you have these two cartilages that sit one on top of the other and kind of surround the whole thing and provide some protection. Then these two parts here, this is the actual vocal ligament. So this is where the muscles come together and come apart and create the actual sound. So we'll jump ahead here. Oh, how do I get rid of this? Clear all drawings. Great. So our hyoid bone sits at the top of the larynx, um, and it has a couple important functions in addition to supporting the larynx, but it allows us to move our larynx up and down, and it's critical for the evolution of humans developing language. Um, One other important point about it is that there's no joint. Almost all bones in the bodies have joints, but the hyoid bone is suspended, so it has a lot of freedom and can move around. So that's an important part about the hyoid bone. And then this is just another view of that, and you can see it kind of stretches around in the back. One of the problems of the hyoid bone, though, is that the jaw and the tongue are attached to the hyoid bone via muscles. So any jaw and tongue tension, and that's why we spend so much time trying to relax those muscles when we're singing, is because it can sort of shift the hyoid bone around and then the larynx, because it's attached, follows along. So that is one of those pesky things where it does some good things for us, but it also can be dangerous for us when we're singing. So going on, here's the thyroid cartilage again. Remember we had that notch here? And you can see that in this view, there are all of these different muscles and ligaments surrounding it. Um, yeah, oh, I mentioned this earlier. Thyroid cartilage is not the same as the thyroid gland. Um, and it gets its name from oid means like, but thyro is means shield. So it really is that kind of protective outer layer of the thyroid cartilage. Next is our cricoid cartilage, and this is a posterior back view. So you can see the cricoid cartilage comes up and protects the back, but in the front, it's very thin. So between the two, they sit together. I drive past Diamond Head, which if anyone has been to Honolulu is one of the pretty prominent features. And I sort of think that the cricoid cartilage looks a little bit like Diamond Head, where it's taller on this one side on the left and then a little bit shallower on the other side. And it forms a full ring around the trachea, which is really important. Cool. We have a couple other cartilages The arytenoid cartilages, if anyone's a Harry Potter fan, I think it kind of looks a little bit like the Sorting Hat, which is kind of fun. And it is important because the vocal folds actually attach to that cartilage. So all of the muscles that open and close the glottis, which is another word for the space in between the vocal folds, is the glottis. We might use the word glottal or a glottal stop, and that's where that comes from, is that area between the two sets of muscles. But the arytenoid cartilage sits on top there and helps those muscles. We have one other important piece of cartilage, which is the epiglottis, and it protects this whole thing when we're chewing. Obviously, we don't want any liquid or food going down our windpipe or trachea. And then it also helps us do the thing called the Valsalva maneuver, which I have some emojis here for why we use that. Also lifting heavy objects. If you take a deep breath in and kind of suspend, hold it, and then you pretend you're going to lift up something heavy, that's the Valsalva maneuver. And that sits over the top. So when we're chewing and swallowing, it folds down over and protects our trachea. Cool. So we spent a lot of time talking about cartilage. We're going to go into muscles now. So this is the most important muscle, which is the primary muscle. The vocal fold itself is called the thyroarytenoid. Uh, Almost all of these muscles are named for their point of insertion, which is where they start, and their point of attachment. So it starts at the thyroid cartilage and then goes to the arytenoid cartilage. It's a little hard to see maybe in this drawing, but you can see that there are some, if I draw it over here, there's some of the muscle fibers that run this way. There's also some on the underside that run kind of sideways. So between these muscle fibers running different directions, there's quite a large range and complex range of movement. Muscles do one thing, they contract, well, and relax. So that's two things, but their main job is to contract. And so when it contracts, it shortens, and then that also thickens the vocal folds. So you can imagine this arytenoid cartilage gets pulled down this way. Sorry, kind of for my sloppy mouse drawing here. Let me get rid of those. Okay, so that is our thyroarytenoid cartilage. Sorry, thyroarytenoid muscle. Um, so let's stop here. And I know like this can start to feel like a lot of different things with crazy long names. If you've ever played guitar or another string instrument, what is the relationship between pitch and thickness of guitar strings? And feel free to answer that in the chat, or if someone wants to be brave and unmute, that's good too.
The thicker the string, the lower the note.
Yeah, exactly. And so in a guitar, all of those strings are, oh, sorry, I paused my share. Here we go. All of those strings are basically the same length, but some are thicker, and that's going to be a lower pitch sounding note. So thinking back to that muscle, if when it contracts, it makes that shorter, but it makes it fatter or thicker, it's the same idea. So the lower the note, we contract that muscle. Going back to it, actually, that's not so important. There's a couple different parts of the thyroarytenoid. We'll just call it the thyroarytenoid, or sometimes you'll see it abbreviated TA. Okay, we also have the cricothyroid muscle, and this one's a little funky. It sits from the outside of the cricoid cartilage to the inside of the thyroid cartilage, and then its job is to do our high-pitched noises. So when it contracts, it stretches the vocal folds really thin, and that gets us our pitch to go higher. So between these two muscles, the cricothyroid and the thyroarytenoid, we can do lower sounds or we can do higher sounds. So we either stretch out those vocal muscles or we push them together and make them thick. So these work in a pair, and that allows us to control pitch. Here's just a quick little video showing the muscle range of the cricothyroid. So you can see it pulls the thyroarytenoid cartilage forward, which stretches that muscle out. Cool. Our arytenoid muscles, there's a couple different sets. They're the ones that live back here. Why don't I make this? So we've got a muscle here. There's one that runs in between, and there's one that runs laterally. And basically, these three muscles, the lateral cricoarytenoid, the interarytenoid, and the posterior cricoarytenoid, they all work to either open or close the muscles. So you can push them together, you can pull it apart. And the interarytenoid here in the back is the one that closes the vocal folds all the way. It's usually the last of these muscles to develop. So sometimes you might have heard of like why young children shouldn't be singing opera. Like that's a something that goes around, or like really dramatic musical theater roles, and people say, well, they shouldn't do that. And then there's no sort of explanation why. Well, the main reason is that they typically don't have full development of the interarytenoid muscle. And so then they're using other muscles which are underdeveloped to compensate for that. But yeah, it's usually not till kind of your 20s that the interarytenoid really is fully developed. And it's one of those muscles that requires some intentional work to get it to do its job completely. Yes, all muscles deal with adduction and abduction of folds. If you ever get lost remembering adduction and abduction, adduction is when you add two things together. So you add it and it comes together. Abduct is like if someone is taken away from their parent, they might be abducted, and then hopefully they're safely returned later on. Uh, Okay, we'll clear this. So this is a top-down view of the vocal folds themselves. So we have, you can see at the bottom, here's the epiglottis. Remember, that's that flap that sits over the trachea when we're chewing, swallowing, drinking, things like that. And then the space in between is the glottis, and we have some of those cartilages there. And so when the folds are open, then we can breathe oxygen in to our lungs. There's quite a lot of space there. When they're closed like this is like when we're blowing across that sheet of paper folded together and creating that buzz. I have a video, which I believe is next. Yeah, here. Clear this. Okay. So this will show us, this is the complete range of all of the different muscles in the larynx. So that's quite a range of different muscle combinations and stretching, pulling, making thinner, making thicker, moving side to side. And we do all of this without thinking about it intentionally, which is pretty crazy. And if you're feeling like, oh my, that's so many different things, that's okay. The important thing I think to get across here is that when we think about giving instructions or we're thinking about our own singing, that um, the voice itself is a complex system. And one definition of a complex system, which I really like, is that a small change in input can have a very disproportionately sized change in output. So when we change one little thing, it might dramatically sound very different, even though we've only adjusted one little item about how we're actually singing. Um, so that's, I think, helpful to see, okay, there's all these different parts. What do we do about it? And I know that's why you're all here. A couple more videos just to look. This is normal phonation. So do, um, we can see what that looks like. This is a video of normal phonation.
Good.
Cool. So you can see the vocal folds come together and come apart and come together and come apart. Now, they're actually doing this several hundred times per second. We can't see each one of those. It's sort of the difference between the frame rate of the camera and the actual voice that we're seeing what that looks like kind of in slow motion. So it comes together, comes apart, comes together, comes apart. And that is normal, healthy phonation. So now, before we jump any further, I think it'd be great to have a little bit of discussion time, and let's try to do this in about 10 minutes or so, and talk about our voice relating to identity, because I think that's an important part of the equation. Sure, there's all the sciencey stuff, and we can get into further details about that, but for so many of us, a voice is such an important part of ourselves. And especially as singers, as musicians that use our voice to express our feelings and our art through that way, our voice is kind of intrinsic to who we are. So I'd like to just open it up and kind of take a little bit of a left turn here and think about how is our voice important, not just physiologically, but how is it important to who we are? Any thoughts? And feel free to jump into the chat or unmute. Both are welcome.
I will start this out by just saying
Yeah.
in rehearsals, our ensembles have been talking about this is our chest voice. And in this culture, we associate our chest voice with being an authoritative sound. And when we flip up into our head voices, the choir tends to giggle because in this culture, we associate something different in using our head voices to talk, even though it might be healthier. So chest voice versus head voice, definitely culturally in this country, feel very different, those two.
Yeah, and certainly culture and identity have a like those big overlap on that Venn diagram. Yeah. But any thoughts about voice as identity, either to you personally that you feel comfortable sharing, or just any ideas you might have about that?
I often wonder if these young women who use the vocal fry are damaging their voices.
That's a good question. The I'm not sure that there's one right answer about that, other than the old rule of thumb that a little bit is okay and a lot is what gets to be dangerous. So certainly repeated behaviors over a long period of time can be dangerous with that. But yeah, I think that that's certainly one example of I feel like I need to sound this way to be cool or perceived a way that I'd like to be perceived, and they use their voice in that way to further their own identity. Yeah, great. Other thoughts?
I notice that I have sisters and we all sound the same.
Mm,
I don't think I sound like them, but when I hear myself on a recording, I sound just like them.
Yeah.
It's just a familial thing. And I have a, a, a stockbroker who I dealt with for years, and he has retired, but his son has taken over, and they sound identical on the phone,
Huh.
identical. So
Yeah.
it's kind of an identity thing.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And obviously there's, I think, probably not a far stretch to say, okay, if people are related genetically, they might have a disposition to have similar sounding voices. Yeah.
My
Yeah, I find the same thing. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and two nephews from the same family might sound very similar, and I have to really listen. But then nephews from a different family, a totally different sound. And I have another comment too, because today we were at speech therapy for my husband who has Parkinson's. And so speech, like voice, is really, really important to us. And
Yeah.
I have different exercises for the singing, and he has different exercises for the speech therapy. But yeah, identification is really, really important with voice, because a lot of times people can't understand him, and then that changes his whole identity.
Right. Right. And certainly the desire to be heard and understood is huge and important. Yeah.
I will use Siri to activate my phone and call people and stuff. And my sister was visiting from California, and she could activate my phone with her voice. I was shocked.
So this is maybe one of those examples where the robots haven't quite overcome us humans yet, right? But because humans have such a crazy ability to distinguish between different people's voices, the fact that we have phones where we don't see who it is, but we can pick up the phone and say, "Oh yeah, that's the person that I recognize their voice just by hearing it." Even if it's someone you haven't talked to in a long time, like our brains are pretty amazing. Yeah. Oh, let me check the chat here. What's going on in the chat? Um, oh, ukulele. I think there were five strings. Maybe one was just a little faint. Um, yeah. Let's think about less individuals here for a minute, but what about speech and sounds culturally? Certainly, I think probably most people here are in the US, but certainly there's huge regional variances in speech patterns and accent, dialect, that kind of thing. How does that kind of, not so much with the language or words, I lived in Texas for a while, so I still say y'all every now and again. That would be a matter of the language, but what about sounds? How might that contribute to different understandings or the voice as a cultural identifier?
As an activist,
Well,
I was advised.
um, slight variation what you are talking about. I am a Spanish speaker, native Spanish speaker, and
Mhm.
I'm always told that my voice is high pitched or too high pitched for the English sound, for the correct English sound. So therefore, I have an accent, even though I'm totally proficient in both languages, but
Yeah.
culturally, the tone of my voice does not match, you
Yeah, right.
know,
And that's again a matter of
the what people expect from the English sound.
right. Right. And that's a perception thing, right? It's that whoever's listening, whereas you
Yes.
might feel like you're doing it perfectly correctly and it is one of those perception things. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think Gwen maybe had a
So,
comment.
yes, as an activist, I have been advised when I'm trying to do persuasion to lower my voice and make it calm. And because a high pitched voice can be threatening.
Interesting. Yeah, one of the things I like to think about it in the kind of going back to like what is the big reason from a like human anthropological point of view of being able to make sounds? As some of this is like, think of caveman as like, okay, if you're in danger, you're gonna yell, and you're not gonna yell, no one can hear you way down there, right? You're gonna yell, ah, I'm scared. And so it's those higher pitch. And I think that even though most of us hopefully aren't having to yell because we're in some sort of physical danger most of the time, there's some of those things that are just kind of innate in our like fight or flight response, and go back to a way different part of human evolution. So yeah. Yeah. Oh, here's a good comment. So in Mandarin, and several other Asian languages, they're actually pitched languages. So you could have the same word, but if it's spoken at a different pitch or inflection, like if it goes down at the end or goes up at the end, those actually have different meanings. They are different words, which is, I think, one of the hard things if someone's a native English speaker trying to learn Mandarin. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Any other comments about kind of voice relating to identity or culture?
I think people project feelings about different accents or tones of voice. If you sound like there's the what do they call it? Down east tones of up, Maine and up in the northern New England states.
Yeah.
People imbue it's political sometimes attributes to them. Or if you're in the deep south, you can or more rural, you'll get different people react differently because they're making assumptions about what you think and who you are just because of where you're geographically coming from.
Right. Right. I'm blanking. I feel like there's a moment in a musical where someone has a Southern accent or a Texas accent, and they're talking with a bunch of people from the North, and then that person is seen as less intelligent because of their accent. And then, well, it turns out they're really smart, and it's not always the case. And yeah, so those differences, and like there's nothing wrong with sounding a different way and having a different accent. It's just how it is. But the perception of that is a really interesting, fascinating thing.
Are there cultures that have more people with perfect pitch just because of how they learn intonations in their language?
That's a great question, and I do not know the answer. Yeah. Yeah,
I
that's
was
a great question.
thinking about my chorale and some other choirs that I've been associated with. And with some, it is still not okay for a woman to become a tenor.
Mm.
It is just, the conductor complains and says it doesn't sound the same. Um, so it doesn't happen in Annapolis or any other encore chorale.
So Beth, that's a really great point that I have something in a later slide, which we'll touch on in a minute. So we'll come back to that. Um, but I think this question or the comment in the chat by Mary Rose is really fascinating. That as a new mother, I could pick out my son from other babies' cry or their sound within days. And yeah, that's again, I think probably why that in or why humans have that ability to distinguish different voices from one another is, yeah, exactly. So that a mother knows which baby is hers. Yeah, so great. So there's so many different layers to this culture question and how we use our voices. So let's jump back in. We kind of have covered the physical side of things of just kind of how the voice works and all the different parts in it. So then let's go into the next topic. Here we go. So presbyphonia. So this is age-related dysphonia. Dysphonia is defined as the alteration in normal voice quality due to structural and or functional causes. So let's unpack that just a little bit. So alteration in normal voice quality. Normal is a hard word, but I think if we're thinking about the ability to speak sentences, be understood, phonate at a reasonable volume. Those are kind of some qualifiers we might use as normal. Now, structural causes goes back to all of those muscles and cartilage and that we just talked about. So let's say, unfortunately, someone had a car accident or something where one of the cartilages got, twisted in a way that it shouldn't. That would be one version of this, where it would be a structural cause. A functional cause is when we've done some sort of behavior that we have changed the use, and then due to age impacting this, it takes our ability from normal to a little bit less than what we might consider a normal voice quality. So that's the definition of presbyphonia. And remember, this is all age related. There are other types of dysphonia, but specifically when it's age related, gets this term of presbyphonia. So a couple different things as we age that impacts our singing. By far the most significant portion or most significant part of this is ossification. Now, ossification is when it's a slow process that happens during the lifetime and that cartilage turns into bone. So if we think about other kind of cartilaginous parts of our body, like our earlobes, our fingernails are made of cartilage, our nose has some cartilage. So that during the course of our life, when we're born, it's really soft and flexible. And as we age, that gets harder and harder and eventually it's not exactly the same as bone, but bone-like. And this happens in our larynx and also to our costal cartilage. And so costa is the medical term for our ribs. And there's some cartilage that connects the front of our lower ribs and in between all our ribs. And so that sort of stiffens the area in our rib cage. Obviously, our lungs sit in our rib cage. So there's a little bit less flexibility there. And also all of that cartilage that surrounded and kind of was the house of our larynx made of cartilage, it starts to get harder over age. This is actually a good thing for singers up until a certain point when it starts to be less helpful for us. Another sciencey term is our vital capacity. So this is something that's measured. If you go to a doctor's office, they'll ask you to take a deep breath in and then you blow through this device and it measures how much air we can exhale fully from our lungs. And as we age, this capacity declines a little bit. Like most things, it's one of those things, if you're healthy and you are doing some cardiovascular exercise, some walking, some running, some things like that, some swimming, that tends to keep your vital capacity really high. And if you're not doing those things, our vital capacity tends to lower a little bit earlier. All right, next slide. So I don't know if anyone uses hyaluronic acid as part of their skincare routine, but this is an interesting thing. So in the vocal folds themselves, there's sort of for lack of a better term, slimy covering, which lets those vocal folds sit and rub up against another and kind of slide together. And this is one of those things that decreases with age. It can also cause a little bit of stiffness in the vocal folds themselves. I thought this was really fascinating that as we age, our skeleton actually grows and gets a little bit bigger in our skeleton. So, and we're talking like hundredths of millimeters. So it's not a lot, but it's a little bit. And part of that actually impacts our ability to sense vibration. And one of the ways as singers we take in information, whether we're kind of cognizant of this or not, is that those sound waves are vibrations and we feel them bouncing around in our oral cavity. And so if we're not as perceptive to that, just because we're not quite as sensitive anymore, that's one item where a little less feedback comes to us as the singer. So those are a few of the changes as we age that kind of have an impact to singing. So let's talk about adduction. And remember, add is when they come together. And this is something that happens throughout the course of life, but it sort of has a progression to it. So ideally, in most singing styles, we want the glottal area to completely close, have complete glottal closure. Now, in younger singers, especially younger, this is assigned female at birth singers, that they have incomplete glottal closure in the back, that it doesn't quite come together. And it was that interarytenoid muscle, which we talked about earlier, that tends to develop later. Once that develops, then the glottis usually closes all the way. There's some really interesting research on this that basically said, well, it doesn't close all the way, but it doesn't provide really any issues. But that is one of the reasons why you might hear younger girls sounding a little bit breathy, and having that sound is more because of the lack of glottal closure. In older singers, this gap is at the front, not at the back, which is really interesting. So here's a look. And this is a full cycle, what should be glottal closure. And this is a patient that has vocal fold atrophy. So their vocal folds are not able to work in a normal state. So we should see through here that like A and B, really the vocal folds should be all the way closed, but they never really come closed. You can see there's maybe a little bit of closure. Let me get my pen here. Like it's almost closed there, but there's pretty big gap in the middle, right? And then there's a little bit of closure here. As we go through this cycle, the gap opens. And then D is when it should be fully open, which it looks to be. And then it starts to close. But you notice, if you look really carefully, that distance is much less than the distance in the middle. So that's what the vocal folds look like if they're not functioning all the way. Now, it's one thing to see this. I think it's very different to hear this. Unfortunately, don't have a recording of this specific patient, but you will certainly know if you hear someone that has really advanced presbyphonia or some sort of severe vocal atrophy. And this is a case where this person should definitely be treated by a doctor, a medical doctor. We'll get into that in just a second. But just I think useful for us to think about what the actual vocal folds look like in that case. There's a couple really interesting things relating to measuring vocal ability. And this is about perceived vocal ability. This is not someone says, oh, you can sing from this note to this note and do this. This is a how do I feel about my voice? And there's this aging voice index, which measures the impact of a voice decline on a person's life. So there are questions on this, like, from a scale of 1 to 5, how happy am I with my voice? Or my voice makes me sad. Questions like this. I think it would be really interesting for choir directors, especially if they're working with aging singers, to get a measure of this. There's been some research using this that says singers score a lot better on this aging voice index than people who are not singers. So maybe that's the good news for all of us today. There's also the voice related quality of life survey. This is not age specific, but for all people experiencing dysphonia, as a way to kind of track and measure how much is their daily life actually impacted by the fact that their voice is not functioning at a normal ability. So This is where we all hear, can we fix this, help this, stop this progression? We've got our little under construction sign here, and the answer is yes. Hooray! There's good news for all of us. So, as I mentioned before, I looked at a couple different exercises used by speech therapists when they're working with patients experiencing presbyphonia. This first one is used for a variety of other things in addition to that. This is called the vocal function exercises, and yeah, widespread usage in voice therapy. So I want to bring up one really important distinction between what it is I do, what it is many of your choir directors that you work with on a regular basis, what they do, and what a medical doctor or speech therapist does. And so rehabilitation, that re part at the prefix at the beginning, means that something had normal function, it's gone away from normal function, and we're trying to restore it back to that point or get as close as possible. That's what rehabilitation means. Now, choir directors, voice teachers, our job is really to take, okay, I have a voice that has vocal function, good vocal function at a normal baseline level, and we're trying to improve that. So we're not saying it's declined and then we're getting it back. We're saying it has some baseline function and we're trying to improve that. And so that word is habilitation, not rehabilitation. So let's all try a vocal function exercise if you'd like to once with me. The first is to sing the vowel E on a medium level pitch as long as one breath allows. And you might surprise yourself with how long you can do this. And it doesn't have to be too loud. So let's all say this is a nice medium level pitch to sing E. So I'll take a breath in and we go E. Okay, I'm out of breath there. So if you want to keep going, feel free. And that's something I think in choir rehearsals we don't do all that often is sing really long notes just sustained on a single pitch. Our pieces going up and down all the time. These next two though might be more familiar, certainly if we've done siren exercises. So this is oh, and then we do that twice, and then we go ooh, all the way down. And then we do part one, which is the same as, well, we do part four, which is the same as part one, but it's just on an O. So we do that for as long as one breath allows. So that is one vocal function exercise. Typically, when this is given out as an instruction from a speech therapist, it would be to do that whole routine 2 times twice a day is sort of our normal dosing of a vocal function exercise. So why does this work for singers? The sustained tone works on helping keeping those vocal folds closed. It's an endurance exercise. The pitch glide stretches the thyroarytenoid muscle and the cricothyroid muscle. Remember, they push and pull each other. And then the O does this really cool thing, especially if we go O wide open, not so much, but if it's ooh, and we're partially not letting all of the sound out on a really small O, it's the semi-occluded vocal tract posture, SOVT. Maybe that's been a term you've interacted with, maybe not. It was kind of discovered about 30 years ago, I believe it was now. And this vocal tract posture, when we don't let all of the sound out, like on an ah, we're letting all of our sound out, but o or v, zh, those sorts of sounds, the vocal energy that we've created or the sound energy actually goes back and helps our vocal folds continue that. So that O is helpful that way too. There's another exercise. You'll see it's very similar in nature to the vocal function exercise, but this one is a phonation resistance training exercise called Forte. Guess what volume you're supposed to do this exercise? Forte. So it's a loud. One of the things we see with patients who have presbyphonia is that they typically don't have the volume ability that they once did. And so the idea is that having this exercise where we're asking them intentionally to be very loud with their voices can help strengthen the muscles to be able to do that. So, oops. Oh, how do I go back? Oh no. Hang on one second. I went too far. And I need to go back. Okay. Here we go. Thanks for your patience. Okay, here's the Forte exercise. So rather than starting on an E, we started on an ah, and it's supposed to be loud. Ah, and again on a single pitch, and we'd sustain it. Maximum sustain is as long as possible. Don't want to, do it to the point where we're gasping for oxygen, but a long ah. And then we do ascending and descending pitch glides over the entire pitch range. So ah. Oh, up and down. This number 3, participant-specific functional phrases. So that might depend on what the person is experiencing. Like if, for example, if they couldn't do a certain consonant, they might do an exercise that targets that specific consonant. And so they'd take that phrase, speaking, and then do exercise number 3 at a lower pitch. So really loud and up high, and then really loud and down low, that we're getting both of those. Again, we go back and talk about, we have the thyroarytenoid muscle, which does our low pitches. We have the cricothyroid muscle, which does our higher pitches. And we want to be demonstrating and working out both of those muscles. So we have those 2 exercises, the VFE and Forte. Why bother? Okay, singing is fun. If you didn't believe this, I'm guessing you probably wouldn't be here on this Zoom call. Some other good news is that singing is a great way to maintain our vocal strength. I like to use the analogy, like if we only were speaking every day, that's like we're taking a walk. If we're singing, that's like we're running. Obviously a much more intense version of that. That singing really is an active muscular exercise. There's, besides the benefits to our muscles, group singing has some really great holistic health benefits, which I know you all believe in because you're part of a choir. And one really interesting study was the Community of Voices trial, which was done in Northern California. And so this researcher got some funding and went to a bunch of community centers, senior community centers, and actually, no, this one wasn't. Oh, yeah, it was among older adults at senior community centers, and then developed some choirs. And what she found is that even 1 hour of rehearsal once per week, the people who participated in that had much higher scores on things like their quality of life, their satisfaction with life, did they have a purpose, that thing. So just even 1 hour per week has some really good holistic benefits. And in that trial, a lot of the singers had never been part of a choir before, which was really interesting. They staggered it out. So, the group that wasn't in a choir for a few weeks then was in a choir and compared the scores on a time scale. So that was a really, really interesting study there, Community of Voices. Okay, so going back to talking about kind of who does what. So we have the medical professional, the medical doctor, a laryngologist. We have choir directors or voice teachers kind of fall in that category. And then we have speech language pathologist. And so all three of those entities, I think, have a different role, but important role to play for the individual. So again, going to voice habilitation, that is for the choir director, the voice teacher, and things as individuals, things we can do as individuals. But when we talk about issues of, oh, I was in an injury, that's when we want to go see the laryngologist. A laryngologist is a specialized form. An otolaryngologist is often known as an ENT doctor. And then a laryngologist is even more specialized beyond that, that their specialty is the larynx and the voice. They often will do a surgical intervention if there's something needed like that. They'll often also refer patients to speech language pathologists who are therapists by nature. So they're using not like surgery, but using different phrases and routines and exercises to try and get the voice back to a normal function. So what we can think about, I think, as a useful thing is taking some of the ideas from the vocal function exercises and from the forte exercise, both of which that targets getting the vocal folds closed and stretching and the flexibility required to do the slides. I like to think about considering your singers or your individual personality type when we're doing this. So one thing on the slides, and let's say there's someone who's really, really extroverted and they're widowed, but they're still living in the single family home. They might be a really good person to do some of these loud exercises. Maybe that helps their extroverted self get to be loud and boisterous and do that. That's really great. Now imagine you have someone who's living in independent or even assisted living, and they're introverted and the walls are a little bit thin. They're probably not going to be the most popular person if they're doing all these loud exercises all the time. So they might want to do one just like more toward the vocal function exercise, which doesn't require you to be so loud. So I think we can kind of take from both. And this is one of the opportunities, but also challenges about vocal exercises in general, is so much really kind of depends on our individual personality, our situation, what we're trying to accomplish and achieve. So the sirens or the slide exercise, the oh, that's familiar, I think, for a lot of singers. We can also start in a very narrow range, maybe just oh, something like that, and then get to be wider. Oh, then maybe all the way up to an octave. Oh, and then just the free for all is obviously good too. So different ways we can do some sirens and slides. This is what I'm going to call the old dog new tricks. So this is a vocal exercise which was published in a vocal method book all the way back in 1887, almost 150 years ago now. And so this, look, it says slowly and evenly, and the voice sings a long sustained note. Now, maybe a dotted half note is not our full maximum phonation, but certainly we could sing, oh, rest, oh, rest, something like that. And maybe for a choir, this idea is going to be a little bit more interesting than just a single note for our exercise. So I think with these long sustained tone warm-ups, we could do something like that as part of our own routine or in a choral warm-up. So there's some interest to using these older ones too. I always like to find, oh, here's something that worked way back when, and oh, here's why we know it still works for us today. So this is I think maybe the elephant in the room for some of us, maybe not, but if we're taking individual private lessons, generally we're expected to practice at home. That's not necessarily the case in choral situations. We come to rehearsal every week. Maybe we take our music home, maybe not. Maybe we're looking at our music at home, but we're not always thinking about practicing our instrument more so than we are practicing the repertoire. So the instrument being the actual vocal mechanism rather than the music we're learning. So this is my encouragement for us all to please do this. We're going back to the VFE idea, the vocal function exercise, in a rehabilitation setting, 2 times through that routine twice a day. And that's every day. Now, if we're starting to work up to that, maybe we say, okay, I'm going to take a couple of those exercises. I'm going to sing a long tone and I'm just going to do the oh, oh. I'm going to go through a siren and maybe I'll do that twice a day for 4 or 5 days a week. And even 5 to 10 minutes a day can really make a difference. Going back to our walking versus running analogy, oh yeah, here's this. How often are singers practicing outside of rehearsal? Singing a 2-hour rehearsal can be taxing without sufficient vocal stamina, um, especially at the beginning of the program year. How many choirs do you know start in kind of end of August or beginning of September? We go through maybe May or early June, and then we're off for the summer. And then, and I will say I'm guilty of this sometimes too. It's like, okay, first rehearsal, we've got all this new repertoire. We're really excited about it. And then we sing for 2 hours straight and we're sight reading. So we're maybe not thinking about using our instrument so much as we're focusing on all the new music. And that can be really taxing, especially if we haven't been singing over the last couple months. So this was something I was trying to be cognizant about with, especially with my church choir this summer, is we started off our first rehearsal and spent a good chunk of time just doing some technique things in our warm-up time and then easing into the repertoire. I also tried to pick at the beginning of the year, I mean, always, but especially at the beginning of the year, things that were less vocally taxing in the repertoire. So it wasn't loud and high, sustained for a long time. Things are more middle range. I wasn't asking, let's sing, your fullest fortissimo all the time right at the beginning. So the idea of building the voice back up, habilitating to be able to do all of the things we want to do. I'm so sorry, I blanked on the name of the person who had the comment about tenors, female tenors singing in a choir. And this is an important thing. Here, is there a good fit between aesthetic goals of an ensemble and the singers in it? And I pose this question for all of us to kind of be thinking about what sort of choir do we want to be a part of? And what is the reason for the choir? There's a lot of good reasons for choir. But I think we want the people who are in that choir to be a good match for what that choir is trying to do. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways that this can be the case or isn't the case. But for me personally, I would rather say, okay, here's the people I'm working with. What is it that I can reasonably expect from this group? And then how does that fit toward the group's goal? Rather than saying, okay, here is the choir, here's the sound that I want from a choir. And I have these 5 singers that, they can do it, but then maybe there's another 10 singers that can only kind of do that sort of sound, or then there's 5 who can't, forcing them to say, okay, we're going to sing in a way that is kind of either beyond the scope of ability or the style of singing, that sort of thing. That can be really frustrating as the singer because then you feel like you're not putting out your best sound. And then it often results in a director being frustrated that they're not hearing the sound that they're expecting. So I think that match of what can a singer reasonably do and what is the goal of the ensemble is a question for both singers and for directors. So that's my question for us all to ponder. I really believe this, that every voice matters, and aging is inevitable. Uh, it beats the alternative. Um, Singing is a really, really great way to maintain our vocal health and strength. Daily practice is even better. Even just a few minutes a day is a great way to do that. And the best part of all is singing together is really good for our mental health with all these holistic benefits we have. So that's what I have for us today. I think we have about 15 or 20 minutes here at the end and would love to kind of have a conversation about any of this, answer any questions you might have. And then it's sort of early afternoon for me, but I know it's getting to be late if you're on the East Coast. So let me stop my share. Yes, questions. I'm happy to send this PowerPoint on if anyone's curious to kind of look up some of these are a few of the works cited, some of these studies, or if you want to go back and look through the slides again, I'll send that to Marianne. I'm sure we can figure out once Amazon's back up and working how to distribute that. So let me stop sharing. Great. Cool. Oh, well, thanks for the nice comments in the chat. Yeah, any questions or things I can hopefully answer or any conversation we'd like to have here?
Can we unmute and ask a question?
Yeah, please. Maybe let's do the raise hand feature just since there's like 90 or so people that'll keep from everyone speaking over one another.
Where's the raise?
If it's down at the react.
Little heart.
Oh, reactions. Huh?
Yeah, the little heart, and then you can raise your hand. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, Martha.
Okay. My main question is, I'm lucky at age 87 that I can sing. I have 2 octaves actually.
Amazing.
But the biggest change for me is from what used to be a solo quality voice to what is a perfectly adequate chorister voice. But why have I lost what I would describe as the richness of my voice?
Yeah, so
the thickness, something robust about my 20-something-year-old voice 60 years later. I mean, I'm very lucky that I have the voice, but it's just not the same kind of really rich quality voice that it was.
So the first part of that is, I think without, spending an hour and having a voice lesson and really being able to hear you, it's hard to say definitively, oh, it's this and not that. But it's probably some combination of things like our muscles being a little bit less flexible, a little bit less strong, and than they used to be, as well as some of those the implications of the cartilage being more stiff. So when we have that muscles pulling on that cartilage, if the cartilage is really rigid, it's not going to be able to move as much as whereas when it's more flexible at a younger age. So it's probably kind of some combination of that, as well as that our own ability to feel those vibrations is sometimes diminished. And some of these things are different for different people and different progressions as we age. But it's so nice to hear from you, and I'm so happy to hear that you're singing at 87. And should we all be so lucky? And maybe it's or even beyond that. And then I think with that too, it's not that it's entirely a use it or lose it situation, but if we continue to sing and we're part of a group and we're doing that, then we do retain some of that vocal function, which I think for me is kind of the long-term goal of how much vocal function can we maintain through the aging process. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Yeah, good. Yeah, next question. Yeah, I don't think it has a name. It says iPad Pro for me.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about our repertoire this season. So we have one song that goes to F, two songs that go to G, and one song that goes to A. And of course, the hardest one is the one that goes to A. And he says that's one you should focus on first. But I find if I don't warm up on the easy songs first, like I like to do the easy songs, but then if I'm limited in time, I don't get to the hard songs.
Yeah. So if we think about the higher the pitch we go, the more and tension is one of those words that I think has maybe gotten a little bit of bad bad rap in the vocal community, because there's certainly a lot of places we don't want excess tension in our jaw muscle, especially in our tongue. But the actual vocal folds themselves, without that muscle being stretched out, it wouldn't make any sound at all. So if we're thinking though, the higher the pitch we go, the more muscular energy required. I think it's exactly that. We don't want to go out and lift the heaviest weight without having stretched out and done some lighter weights first. So yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea of start with the ones that are a little bit more focused in range and then work our way out to the more extremes of our range. And then the other part of it too, I don't know if there's any baseball fans. As soon as this is done, I'm going to go watch the recording of the Mariners Blue Jays game. But a starting pitcher only throws a game every 5 days, right? They give themselves some time to recover. So if every day we're saying, oh, I'm going to go to the full extreme of my range, I'm going to go to the full extreme of our range, then we never have a chance to recover that muscle. So, maybe there's a few days a week where we say, oh, I'm intentionally going to kind of limit and sing to a comfortable part of our range. And it's often those last 3 or 4 notes at the extreme of our range that goes from, oh, this is easy to, oh, wow, I really have to work to this. So, yeah, I think thinking about it, in that athletic kind of training way is useful. Cool. Good. Magali, you have a question, and then I'll go over to some questions in the chat.
Yes, I just wanted to note, as far as reaching, my opinion, as far as reaching high pitches, there's just so much going on there. It's a matter of approach, what a voice teacher is teaching you or not teaching you. And some techniques are good for me, but they're not good for somebody else. There's just a lot going on. But as far as
Yeah.
what we have been talking about today, aging, and what happens to our voices,
Yeah.
I find that with me, hydration is critical, just
Yeah.
critical. If I go to my rehearsal and for whatever reason I forgot to
Yeah.
drink at least one full bottle of water,
Yeah.
I have more trouble than if I remember to drink my water before rehearsal and during rehearsal too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that works better for me, and I'm more comfortable if I continue to hydrate. And during the
Yeah.
concert too, especially. So
Yeah. Hydration is super important. One thing, just a little misnomer to throw out here. Oftentimes I've heard some singers say, "Oh, well, I need to drink tea because it will hydrate my vocal folds or my vocal cords." Now, if water or any sort of liquid is actually getting on our vocal folds, that warrants an immediate trip to the emergency room. That's what we call oh, I'm just blanking on the term. But if we're swallowing liquid into our lungs, super bad, like one of the serious medical emergencies. When we're drinking water, it goes through our body, through our digestive system, and then hydrates our muscles through that way. But yeah, hydration, certainly super important. Yeah, good. Let me go to a couple of things in the chat here. How can we raise our range? So this is a great question. So range itself is really a function of how our ability to stretch out our muscle and specifically how much pressure we can put on that cricothyroid muscle. Um, so there's some of that which is restricted by our body. You know, everyone has a different body shape on the inside and the out. That's why some people are altos and some people are sopranos. They might have a different size, different length of these muscles. But working with your director, working to do some exercises that continue to develop that flexibility and ability to do that is certainly part of it. Most people, though, I think we can develop to sing maybe a couple steps, like half steps to whole steps, maybe one or two. But most of us are really kind of constrained by our physical anatomy. That's just what we're blessed with the way we are. And so yeah, maybe we can get an extra note or two with some kind of targeted exercises toward that. But most people aren't going to discover, oh, today I can sing to a high C, and then I work for a few months and now I can go to a high G. Like that's not fairly typical with regard to range. And all voice types are important. The world needs just as many altos, if not more, than it needs sopranos. So yeah, good. Good. Okay, here's a question. Vibrato. Vibrato is a natural thing. Uh, there's I think a difference between a vibrato and what we call more of a wobble sound. Now, without getting into too many of the technical details here, the wobble is generally from there's less stability and the muscles being able to kind of maintain that vocal strength. So most of the time, if people are on this routine of practicing a little bit, regularly, that the wobble they'll find maybe doesn't go away entirely, but is less significant. But then vibrato itself is a naturally occurring phenomenon just with the way the human voice works. Some people have more vibrato than others. Certainly, this gets into the aesthetic style. If there's a choir that says we really prefer a non-vibrato sound, that's the aesthetic preference of that ensemble or director. And if you're a person that has a strong vibrato, maybe that's not the best place for you. Now, I realize life's not perfect and we don't always say, oh, okay, I want to go to the choir that does this type of repertoire and sounds this kind of way and meets on Tuesday nights and has chocolate chip cookies at the break instead of almond cookies or whatever. Like there's not always infinite options, but picking the big battles first, for lack of a better term, might be good. Good. Cool. Yes. Singing has increased breath control. Yeah, certainly. We spend so much time working on our breath control with singing, and that's great. Let's see a couple other ones. Hydrating, is warm water or cold water better? I think water, either way, warm or cold is good. Some singers use and this is like professional singers that are traveling a lot, they'll use like a humidifier mask, especially on the airplane, because the low humidity can kind of dry things out. So that can be a way to keep things hydrated as well. Yeah, good. A couple other questions here. I see someone who is named Owner. Oh, we need you to unmute.
How's that?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. I just wanted to comment because I've been singing since I was 9.
Oh, wow.
79. So it's been a few years. But what I've
Yeah.
found is as I get older, I tell people I'm now talking in my old man's voice because it feels so different. It doesn't have the same tonality about it or resonance or whatever. But when I get to a rehearsal and we start with warm-ups, I find that it's gone. I'm back up to a normal voice. So I'm finding that is really a unique and excellent way to feel like I can still sing.
Yeah, certainly. Well, and so then I might press on you and say, okay, what is it in those warm-ups that is helping your voice get back to that point? And are there some things you could do at home that might help get you to that vocal ability that you seem to desire? Yeah.
Yeah, if I can, I'll sit at the piano and work on the music that the notes that I need to learn, but I don't always work on the voice to get there. But if I do a walk, I'll find a lot of times I'm just on my own without even thinking about it. I'm suddenly singing something or just coming up with some range and notes. I found that I could hit a B flat this year, which is pretty good. So I'm
there you go.
Gonna stick with it.
Yeah, good.
Thanks.
Good thing. Yeah, David.
Speaking to me, David Dawson.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to meet you. I sing on the East Coast, Upper West Side, Manhattan. And regarding hydration, it's, I've sung in many choirs, and regarding hydration, it seems to me that it's important to hydrate before the day of an event or practice, because it takes water and a certain amount of time to get into the body. If you're drinking it on the day of a performance, like an hour before the performance, that water hasn't had time to get inside so that you can have the moisture built into your organs, into your vocal folds, so that you can benefit from it. It's so I always try to drink a lot, at least 2 days, and then 1 day before the event. I mean, quite a bit. And I slow down during the day of the event, because I have actually overhydrated in the sense that during an event, I had to really run off the stage at halftime. Yes, that actually happened at Carnegie Hall. And I had to run. They didn't want us to, but I had to. The point is, isn't that right?
Yeah, I think certainly we wanted that steady hydration over time. And just like so many things, a little bit regularly is so much better than saying, okay, I'm not going to drink any water for a week, and then, oh, I have rehearsal tomorrow, so I'm going to drink all my ounces of water in that day. Like, yeah, that's not as good as just that constant, steady hydration. Yeah. Great.
So, friends, it is 9 p.m.
Yeah.
here. It's still the middle of the day for Collin, but the rest of us are getting ready for bed. Collin, did you have any last words just to kind of wrap things up for us?
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time, and I hope this was interesting and hopefully a little bit inspiring for us to all keep singing and keep doing this thing that we love to do, and take care of our instrument that allows us to do that. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all today, and keep on singing, and hope that we can connect some other time. If you ever find yourself in Honolulu, please reach out, and yeah, you know where I am.
Choir trip.
I think maybe our next camp needs to be there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, I like the way you think, Dr. Mary.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I also want to remind folks that this has been recorded. And so I know there were some comments about, could we get the slides? But you can come back and rewatch. And if there was something that maybe you wanted to go back and listen to again, you can access this. Give us a few days to process it and get it up to share with you. But you can always come back to this information. So thank you once again. again, Dr. Boothby. It was wonderful to have you here, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much, our Encore family, for being with us. And again, thank you to the DC Arts and Humanities Council for sponsoring our monthly master classes. And we'll be back next month to talk a little bit more about vocal changes as we age, specifically from a woman's point of view, with the authors of Singing for Change. So come back and learn some more. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Bye.